Hello, I'm Peter Corr. Welcome to Rejoin Rants.
Hello, I'm Lisa Burton, and tonight we're joined by our amazing guest, Supertanskiii, aka Tan Smith, incredible social media commentator and political commentator.
Thank you.
Rejoin.
So, Tan, tell us a little bit about how you started on your career on social media and how that exploded, and how quickly did that happen for you?
It got out of hand really quick. Yeah, I started making videos during lockdown, just kind of roasting Conservatives on TikTok, because I was a photographer just before the lockdown, and I started a little temp job literally about a month before lockdown to get some extra money for some lenses. And I was only supposed to be there a couple of months, and there was like a little rude boy in the office who was like, "Oh, I'm TikTok famous, bruv." And I was like, "What the hell is TikTok?" And then I started off making a few little cat videos, and then as I scrolled through, I found a few political content creators, and I was like, I've always been politically minded, so I just started taking the mickey out of Tory MPs as the pandemic hit, and I was stuck in this awful job. And but luckily, I was lucky to have a job, I guess. I worked throughout the entire lockdown in this little office job. And I'd go home every night. And then we were sent home, obviously, with all the laptops and everything to work at home. And I would go from like being upstairs in my office to going downstairs, looking through the news. And then I would just pick on a particular Conservative MP to take the piss out of. And people seemed to really like it. And then it exploded. It got out of control. And then I started, making contacts with investigative journalists. And then it got a bit deeper, because then I was like, shit, things are going on. This is going mad, right? They're behaving terribly here. This is a scandal. And then I felt just compelled to tell people what I was finding out from those sources. And I was looking at the news in horror, just thinking, why aren't they saying what's really going on with what the government are up to? And then I was in. I've got this thing about justice where I hate injustice, and I hate the fact that people can't make an informed decision. And to me, that's not a democracy. So the thing that fuels me is just trying to, in my own colourful way, tell people a bit about what's happening, really, and trying to make them laugh a bit along the way, because it's grim.
Yeah, that's what I love about it. It's, you do bring that humour into it. It's absolutely brilliant. And
try, it's hard. It's very difficult. Yeah, it's very difficult to do that. Yeah, it's getting harder by the minute, actually.
Yeah.
It's what makes it so interesting, though, because a lot of political commentary is so dry. And I think that's why you have a lot of younger people paying attention to what you do as well, compared to a lot of other political commentators, is because you are funny, and you just seem to be yourself in your videos.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was my brother-in-law actually that saw you first on TikTok, and he just sent me one of your videos on Messenger. This was probably a year and a half ago now or something.
Wow.
And it was just, it was hilarious. Some of your funniest videos, in my opinion, are ones that are not actually about politics. There was a little one you put out about your cats being incestuous. That, honest to God, I was drinking a can of Coke when I was watching that, and I literally had to spit it out while I was driving the lorry going along.
The rimming.
Yeah.
It was true though. It was just like, I like people to get an insight into like my day-to-day life, which is often like just ridiculous. And yeah, my Valentine's Day was spent trying to stop my cats from licking each other's
Valentine's Day, yeah.
Of all days as well. As a singleton, I'm just sitting there, and then I realised that what I'd done, because they were sitting there all cute at first, I realised that I'd started recording. So I accidentally recorded a porno of my cat. And then the realisation just kind of hit me. But no, I love making people laugh, wasn't hugged enough as a kid, probably, like most comedians.
It's really, really refreshing. And like I say, it's nice that we need those younger people to get more involved in politics and really be exposed to what's really going on. So people like yourself are absolutely brilliant, for that. I didn't come across you till on Twitter, because I'm old and I don't do TikTok. It's just, to me, it's like a massive bombardment of I mean, I try. I'm just.
It is weird. It is weird. The algorithm's really highly attuned as well. It's a bit of a chaotic place. I mean, I've moved a bit more away from that now, but Femi was the person that introduced me to Twitter. And there's been so many times where Femi's gone, I'm so sorry, Tan. Like, I feel very responsible now. But yeah, he uploaded one of my videos, and then I went from having nobody follow me on Twitter to having tens of thousands of followers within months. Like it took off in a crate, even quicker than TikTok. It was
you've got about 220,000 now. I mean, it's pretty big.
220 odd on TikTok. On Twitter, 250 on TikTok, about 30 or 40 on Insta and YouTube each. It got out of hand. But then once I realized that I could reach more people, it was never an ego thing. It was never like I don't really like the spotlight being on me, really, if I'm honest with you. It was more, I can get more people to know about this thing that this Tory MP's doing. I'm just going to flood the social media apps with it. And then there's more chance of us going up against those bastards in the tabloids and the media if we can get that message out about what they're doing to more people. And that's what drives me, is the truth getting out. And
that's the same. It's the same with us, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the same with us.
I hate
you and I don't like being in the limelight, stepping out, don't like being observed, and all of that. But it's fundamentally, for me, I've always hated bullies, hated liars. And, since I was a child, I've always stuck up for the underdog. I've always seen that. That's always stood out for me, you know what I mean? But no, I don't really like the limelight. When Peter asked me to speak at the National Rejoin March, I said, I'll need to think about it. It took a month to think about it, said no, and then immediately changed my mind and said yes, because I thought, well, I'm going to regret not doing it, but it's that pull, isn't it? Where you push yourself beyond your comfort zone. You put your head above the parapet and expose yourself.
Yes.
It's because we care. It's not like we don't do it for fun. And I know you get a huge amount of abuse as well. Yeah. So, no one does it for that. Where does the most abuse come from? Is it definitely X, Twitter?
Twitter, absolutely. Always has been from day one. I mean, I got a fair amount on TikTok in the beginning. I mean, I got it from day one on TikTok. When it depends on what I was talking about. There was a few moments. I mean, I don't really talk about geopolitics an awful amount. I'm still wrapping my head around the ins and the outs of British politics. But when I mentioned Trump once, God, that was like on TikTok, it was like a bot farm came for you. And when I talked about Brexit a couple of years back on TikTok, it was like a bot farm came for you. But it's totally different, because it's once you block an account on TikTok, it's hard for them to make another. Whereas it's almost like Twitter's designed for people to abuse you. It's designed for people to cyberstalk you, because you can have multiple sock accounts where you can just screenshot, and cyberstalking is actually, once someone's blocked you, continuing to kind of like harass them and screenshot them and things like that. So a lot of people, I don't think, realize that they are actually committing a crime, but then it takes the police to actually enforce it, which they absolutely do not. And they do not take women seriously whatsoever, as the headlines will prove. But yeah, most of it's on Twitter, and a lot of it feels very coordinated. And a lot of it looks like it's coming from progressives or people that claim to be progressives or socialists, whether they are or not, or whether they are just like little bot farms and stuff. Because there's been a bit of byline. Peter Dukes and Byline was telling me about how they use these bot farms to kind of like harass and bring people down and stuff. And there's a lot of bad actors, and there's a lot of Tufton nonsense going on, isn't there, all the time? But Twitter is the place where the people there will try to destroy your life. They will try to ruin your life. They won't just try and harass you a bit. They, particularly these people that are claiming to be kind of like on the hard left, whether or not they are, I do not know. You can't verify who anyone is. They will dox you, smear you. I've had my nephews threatened, my little baby nephews threatened. I've had family members threatened. I've had overt threats and my full name and address leaked on there. And this came literally just weeks after I was threatened by the hard right as well. So what they do is they'll, these people, whatever side they're on, they'll leak stuff about you. And then if it is, say, like a Corbynite that doesn't like you, even though I voted twice for Labour under Corbyn, they'll harass and dox you and put this stuff out about you. And then the Tories and the hard right will then leap on it. So they're all helping each other. And you're like the common enemy for some reason. And yeah, it's really mad. And a lot of women I know get unsustainable levels of abuse on there, unsustainable to the point where they've had to leave.
Yeah.
I know that women, it really, as Lisa will attest, I think, I am a massive feminist myself.
I can attest to that. He's a wonderful feminist. Yeah.
And it drives me mental. I said to you not long ago, Tan, that on this whole NRM thing started on Facebook as a Facebook group. We had like about 15,000 members within a couple of months. And it was about 50-50 men and women on there. And I noticed within a month or so that it was most of the comments and posts were by the men in the group. So I literally posted in the group to ask the women why they wasn't getting involved. And rather than reply on the post, a lot of them sent me private messages to tell me exactly why they weren't publicly putting their name out there. And some of it was just horrifying. I don't know. I honestly don't know how you guys do it. And it just makes you... I don't know what to say, really. I don't know how you guys do it. I mean, I just don't see that sort of abuse like you get.
That's the problem that we have, is that the men don't see it, so they don't think it exists. Not you, because obviously you're aware of it and you're talking out about it, and men talking out about it is so important. And as I said to you earlier, like, you need other men to affirm this to men that it happens, because they don't believe us. But yeah, it is grim. It is really grim. But the reason that I continue regardless is because I'm not letting the fuckers win. I'm not letting them drive me off my platform that I've built brick by brick for myself. And yeah, so I'm just running on pure spite and determination at this point. I'm not letting you win. I've taken this much. I'm fucked if I'm stopping before the election, because I've got kind of like a laser focus on, I've got an objective in mind that I want to achieve and help achieve. And if I hide away, then there's also the added problem on Twitter, whereby I've got at least 3 or 4 accounts that are daily pretending to be me, to the point where they've stolen my photos. They've like kind of cloned my username, and they post smears, defamatory stuff, like pretending to be me, to the point where people have actually, that I was approaching for work, have thought that's me and lost me work and such. And if I come off Twitter, they'll just assume my identity. So I have to keep myself there, at least in part, as a kind of like shop front as such, to use a bad term, but like as someone that's visible there. Because if not, they'll claim to be me, and they'll assume my identity. And they work day in, day out posting, they take my photos, they Photoshop my photos to make me look fatter, to make me look older. They come for me on my physical appearance. They come for me on, they make up outlandish lies, fake screenshots, anything to try and bring you down, really. So with Twitter, I've got to kind of have some presence there, because otherwise they'll just take over, and God knows what they'll say and do, and they'll just completely destroy my reputation even more.
It's your right to be there. And I know it doesn't help, but the more they attack, like with Carol Vorderman, like with yourself, you really are scaring them. They are really threatened. And, I don't get that much. It's weird. I don't get that much peace. I'm a pro-European. I live in Spain. I'm vice chair of Citizens' Right Remain. So a lot of it is that. But when, in my own capacity, I write, and when I write about usually equality issues, the Tories. I've written about the Common Sense group, the Net Zero Scrutiny group, Friends of Russia group. I've written about a bias around immigrant crimes, the war on trans, and things like that. So in my private kind of activism, I'm more like that, and that's more, I mean, with the Brexit stuff, it's like, oh, go and drink your sangria, you know, you can't say anything anymore, and, you know, you don't live here, that sort of stuff, that misunderstanding of just because you've moved away, you should have nothing to say about the country, you know, where your family live and your children and your businesses, or, you know. But it's usually around the equality issues that I get stuff over. I mean, I've been told that, you know, couple of times I'm going to be raped by Muslims and things like that because I specifically stand up against Islamophobia, and my children will be, and all of this stuff. It's just nasty, you know. And when you point out, it's something that's really pisses me off is that the far right, you've got all these angry white men often telling us that they're concerned for our safety because of this group of people. And it's the same, you know, with the transphobia. It's all these people pretending they care about women's rights and women's safety of women and girls, but they never go after anyone unless that person is an immigrant or has an ethnic background or, you know, something like that. So they're just hypocrites. I'm all for some people who want to be advocates against sexual violence, but, you know, you can't just pick and choose who the people that you're angry about. You know what I mean?
They're using it as a front. They're using it as a front for their bigotry, essentially, when it comes to whether it's racism or whether it's transphobia or anti-LGBT thoughts. They're using our cause, they're weaponizing our cause. And I've had, like, we were discussing earlier, like, defending trans people has caused me to have you know, turf males telling me that I deserve to get raped and stuff. So yeah, like as you were saying, it's grim. It's really grim. And then you get loads of those women that are radicalized, I think. Also, I think they're quite radicalized groups of people joining in and agreeing. And it's like, yeah, that's feminism, isn't it? That's feminism. I mean,
this is what I don't understand, right? So it's feminism, but as a woman, and every woman I've spoke to, I've got 2 adult daughters as well. I've got obviously my mum, my aunties, you know, we've all talked about any sexual harassment we've had in our past, etc., etc. I don't know a woman, including my own daughters, who haven't had some form of groping, flashing, you know, abuse as a child or whatever.
Worse.
And obviously domestic violence, you know, as well in the household. We know that 3 women a week are killed by partners or ex-partners. So so these women who are made to be fearful by the threat of a man possibly trying to be a woman to go into a bathroom. I'm like, where have you been living all of your lives? You know, it's like men have access to us all of the time, and they're denying our own lived realities of our own experiences of abuse. And it just makes me so angry, you know, that especially when women fall for it. It's like, you know, I've you know, all of my abuses come from white males, guess, you know, I mean, I've never been exactly. So that, I think, is something that we really need to hammer home. It's fear mongering, it's unjustified, and it's a really toxic environment that's being run by.
Worse for marginalized groups, including women. I mean, a lot of the time it is the biggest danger. I mean, they're letting off the hook the people that commit globally, statistically, all of the rapes and murders, which are cis men. Simple as that. That's who are globally, statistically at the highest. It's an epidemic. There's a violence epidemic, and that's getting let off the hook. Like, you know, men have infiltrated those spaces. Cis men have, to commit those crimes countless times. I've never ever once been harassed or abused by a trans person. You know, or an immigrant or such. And, you know, these are the same men that will sit there and they'll go on about the grooming gangs or whatever, because it's, you know, because they're brown people doing it. And then if you tell your story about something that's happened to you, you're lying, or you can't prove it, or it's innocent until proven guilty, or you're smearing that man, you're trying to bring him down. So it's not really about us. They're just latching on to something. And there's a lot of radicalization going on. And I think a lot of that is obviously coming directly from Number 10, because it deflects from their rampant criminality, their failings, their, you know, them presiding over hundreds of thousands of people dying from COVID and austerity and billions spaffed up the wall. They're using vulnerable groups as human shields just to deflect from all of that. And it's so obvious once you see it, like, but so many people are just caught up in falling for these little culture wars that they're starting everywhere, because perhaps on some level it just speaks to their innate bigotry. It's like they always had that bigotry. Now they've got something to latch onto for it. Maybe they've always hated, gay people or trans people or immigrants or whatever, and it's just giving them a free run at it. I mean, the Islamophobia is particularly galling at the moment on that front. I mean, we've got open, unabashed Islamophobia coming from multiple members of the government and ministers. It's shocking. And then, Sunak dares to go out and make a speech about bloody unity. And it's like, you having a laugh, mate? You're stoking.
That speech wound me up because it's probably the biggest. I thought Boris Johnson was bad at gaslighting, but fuck me, that speech was unbelievable. And like, what was it? 2 or 3 days later, you had Jeremy Hunt. So Rishi Sunak makes a speech saying how we need to stop the extremism from all sides, blah, blah, blah. 3 days later, Jeremy Hunt comes out and blames the cost of living crisis on diversity training at workplaces.
Fuck's sake. You couldn't make it up. I mean, and also he ignored the fact that Braverman was saying that Islamists are taking over the country, ignored the fact that none of them would say that what Lee Anderson did was Islamophobic and racist.
Yeah.
They'd had Malcolm Tucker like standing there with like a gun, like telling me if they said Islamophobia, it'd be like game over. And then, and Liz Truss going fully mental in America with Bannon saying that, Tommy, not correcting the guy when he said Tommy Robinson was a hero, and then
should destroy democracy.
And agreeing with him that like Islamic extremists are going to take over Rochdale. I'm no fan of Galloway. I think the guy's an absolute unit, but at the same time, that's not what's happening here. And they're tarring and the whole protest element as well, which, as you guys, you have your own protests. You know what that's all about. I'm no fan of the police, especially with their record on women's rights, but with the marches, they've handled it well. They handled it really well when Braverman tried to incite a far-right mob on Remembrance Day. And they've struck a reasonably good balance, I think, because it's tiny pockets of troublesome people in like hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people, possibly. But where's their real evidence? I mean, they've not presented any real evidence of there being like extremists. So what they're just doing is what he did in that speech very cleverly and very deliberately is equate extremism with Free Palestine movement. With protest, extremism with protests. Yeah. And he was planting that seed in people's heads, and it was desperate and it was weak, and it's everything you've come to expect from Sunak. But yeah, he's not too far off Johnson. He's just a different type of bastard, isn't he, really?
He is. He's almost like an even more fucking sly version of Johnson. And he uses the fact that he's not a white man as well. And as a white man, I feel uncomfortable saying it, but I've heard people who aren't white men saying it too, that he's using his race to say racist stuff, thinking that he can't be attacked because he can't attack him because of the race he is, even though he's saying the same stuff that other people are. And it's the same with Suella Braverman and Priti Patel when she was in too. Because I live in Burton-on-Trent, and it's a really big Muslim community here. And they're all bloody lovely, by the way. Some Tories would call this area a no-go area. I think what they really mean is it's a no-go area for this Conservative Party. No, absolutely. I mean, I live in Essex, North Essex, but my neighbours on one side are Nigerian, and actually a Gurkha family on the other side, and we share food, and we've made our own little. They've brought a sense of community to our street, right? And that's exactly what the Tories don't want. They don't want communities mingling with each other and chatting. But I went out of my way because of them to make sure that my neighbours felt comfortable when they moved in, because I'm like,
I'm not going to let them win and take away that. We need to build our own little kind of sense of community. On the subject of them weaponizing, I've had friends that are people of color that have said similar to what you've said and echoed that. I personally don't feel comfortable really making that judgment call, but it is kind of something that unfortunately seems to be more seen as accepted, because
I don't feel comfortable saying it, but I think it's true, and I think it has to be said, because I really think it's deliberate on their part, and it's part of the gaslighting thing. I don't think we should let them use that, because
I think with we first had it with Priti Patel, and she has been called out by other people of color, and she's a racial gatekeeper. So basically, it's a person of color. And when they stand there and go, well, there's no such thing as racism, what are you talking about? She's an advocate for it. So she's denying the experiences of other people with color, and making white people who have maybe possible to be bigots, and the people behind them in power saying, look, we can't be racist. Look, we have this person of color here. They can't be racist, so therefore we aren't racist. But the people of color who do that are really doing their other communities injustice, because they're denying the reality of the people. Of course, there's racism. We know it. It's institutional. It's through the police. It's through the justice system. It's through our health system. It's all of the figures are there. All of the facts there support that. Whether it be you get double the sentence if you're a person of color to a white person. You're 4 times more likely to die in childbirth. Your job application, if you've got an unusual name, you're less likely to get that job. It's embedded everywhere. So for someone to stand up and say there is no racism in Britain, it's ridiculous, it's just utter bollocks.
It's a betrayal. It's a betrayal to those people too. And I've heard my friends have echoed things along those lines in terms of that. And it's a massive dog whistle and a massive pat on the back to anyone that's racist, because a white guy that's sitting there being racist can go, oh, look, Sunak's saying there's no racism and he's not white, so it's fine, and it's the Sewell report in itself proved that institutional homophobia, misogyny and racism exists in virtually all of our institutions in Britain. And that wasn't news to people that have been on the receiving end of it. Certainly wasn't for me. Wasn't for my friends that are of different races. It wasn't for friends that are gay or in the LGBT rainbow as such. It was just affirming, and that was just pushed down by the government, like many other reports that prove their corruption and the fact that they've taken their eyes off the ball.
I'll tell you what it is with me as well. I used to be in the army 20 odd years ago, despite me looking just 24 years old. But no, and back then, I've come a long way. I want everyone watching or listening to this to know that I'm a completely different person now. But I can spot racism a mile away, and that is because basically everyone, including me, basically were racist and sexist in some of the things we did in the army. And it was institutionalized as in it came down from the very top. And if you didn't join in, you were the odd one out and you were bullied. And there's been suicides in the army because of people that didn't want to join in with that kind of thing. So they ended up being the outcast and being the bullied one because they didn't want to get involved with racism and sexism and stuff like that. So I can spot it a mile off. I know when it's racist or sexist, and I know if it's institutionalized, and it definitely is. It's from the government, it's from the police, everywhere you say, right down to, like you said, women of colour having more chance of dying in a hospital in childbirth, for fuck's sake. I mean, what's that all about?
It's because they're dehumanised. It's because their pain's not believed. Like, women's pain's not believed anyway. I've been on the receiving end of really severe medical misogyny and negligence, I think, actually, on a few occasions. And you're made out to be a hysteric, even nowadays. And if you're a woman of colour, like anything that affects me as a woman of colour is going to have it a million times worse. They're like the most marginalised group there is, really. And trans people, similar. Any kind of like marginalised or vulnerable community, is going to suffer what I suffer tenfold, which is why it's so important for feminism to be intersectional. And if feminism's not intersectional, to me, it's not feminism. It's just a front for bigotry. So yeah, it's so important to be inclusive of everyone. You know, nobody gets left behind is my motto on that front. But it's because you're just not believed on a base level. And the thing is, like with what we suffer online, there's nowhere to turn. I've gone to the police about credible death threats, and they've tapped some stuff into the computer, taken the evidence, sent me a text message a couple of days later going, oh, we're not going to pursue this. Not even called me, sent me a text message after telling me to keep all my downstairs windows shut, after telling me to lock my doors when I'm in the house on my own, me carrying a knife around with me because I'm scared. But fortunately, I've gone through advocate groups now, and we're pushing for them to act. But most women don't have that. And, you know, I've got a friend whose friend took their own life because they were stalked. And the guy got let off, got a suspended sentence. The next day, the moment he got released from court, he turned up at her house. And there have been women that have been murdered that way. And, you know, it's like the whole knife thing with the woman that was murdered in her house with a knife. So he got a lesser sentence because it didn't happen on the street. If it happened on the street, the starting sentence would have been higher. And, you know, I know about 3 or 4 women, well, 2 women specifically with life-changing injuries from domestic abuse. None of those men are in prison. We just have to form our own little kind of protective network where we warn each other about a guy. So if there's a guy that one of us has seen before who's done something dodgy, or he's not, you know, listened when you've said no, or he's behaved a bit weird towards you, we have to kind of check in and warn each other about those men, because they're just walking free to do it again. And like with cousins, there's a pattern of escalation. So the fewer consequences they face, the more emboldened they are, like say the racists are, to just increase the pattern of offending to it gets, because society just goes, it's fine, you can do this. I mean, it's essentially decriminalized to rape a woman now. That's how low the conviction rate is. So
wasn't it literally quite recent that the law was changed? I can't remember how many years ago it was now, but it's in pretty recent history that the law was changed so that it was finally illegal to rape your own wife.
Very recent, yeah. I think it was the early 90s, I think.
Yeah, I think the first time I heard that, I was just like, this is a man as well.
They turn up domestic abuse cases and they'd ignore abuse, domestic abuse cases going, oh, it's just a domestic, you know. I saw that growing up on my street, where, you know, my mum would go round to help a neighbour because she was getting beaten to within an inch of her life by her husband, and the police wouldn't even turn up. They'd go, oh, you know, they'll sort it out amongst themselves, won't they? They'll probably end up killing her. Yeah.
I saw it too, actually, growing up. She won't mind me saying, she won't listen anyway, so I don't care. But with my own mum, and seeing my own grandparents, like, almost sticking up for him after doing it, sort of saying, you know, it's just a bit of domestic argument you've had, you need to just make it up for each other. And being a young kid back then, I was the only one sort of saying to my mum, like, what are you fucking doing? We're going, come on, let's fucking go, sort of thing. Do you know what I mean? Whereas everyone else would just, like you say, it just seemed to be acceptable. I hope that is changing. Some people, when you're growing up in that sort of atmosphere, they say you either become an abuser yourself, or you become like proper against it and working against it. And I've definitely fallen on the latter. But I do hope it's changing. I mean, listening to stories from all of
I'm not sure if it is. You know, I mean, I was looking at the stats today, 2.1 million domestic abuse incidents last year in the UK. Obviously, we've got to say not all of them are male to women. There are women to male as well, but I
don't think you should say that. It's such a tiny number.
It's actually not. It's about. Well, it's difficult to. It's about 73% was against women, but then we don't know if the male in the house was maybe an adolescent as well. So you can have violence against, say, a young male in the house, a son or something like that. But what I found was really interesting today was A lower proportion of women in London experience domestic abuse, 1.8% compared to 5.1 and 7.2% in the rest of the UK. And I thought,
you don't report it because the Met are absolutely useless and there's loads of offenders in the Met. So maybe there's like that lack of confidence.
That's what I was wondering. Do you think it's because there's such lack of confidence? I don't believe that, that's the case. It's just lack of confidence, do you think, in reporting to the police?
Yeah, I do. And I have it. I didn't think I waited until things got really bad before I started reporting the serious crimes. And I thought, do you know what? I've left it to the point where it's really bad. They're going to do something about it. Not once have they done anything about it. Like, and those men are just emboldened to continue doing it. But it's also really important to note that whilst absolutely it's appalling whoever is on the receiving end of abuse, the way that this abuse tends to escalate is different in the genders. Men notoriously kill. 2 women per week are killed by a man that they thought they could love and trust. They kill at an alarming rate, and they also tend to sadly kill children as revenge towards partners too. So it's more deadly. I'm not saying like emotional abuse and physical abuse is ever acceptable on either side. I mean, I've got male friends that have suffered domestic abuse. It's horrific. But it's generally the escalation and the way that it kind of gets worse, and the way that that kind of entitled, possessive nature can exist in both genders, but it tends to kill women more when they're on the receiving end of it. So it's important to make that kind of distinction. But it's never been worse, I don't think. I grew up, I've faced sexism and, harassment in my jobs when I was very young. I was first, wolf whistled at or had comments made at me from a car when I was in my primary school uniform, just as I was going to secondary school.
Yeah, I had the same.
Yeah, that's the first time I was followed home by a weird car was when I was about 13. And and it's just got worse from there. But nowadays you've got this kind of weird, kind of like that kind of MAGA-esque kind of like take crowd that are kind of increasing the risk towards women. I mean, after the pandemic, the spiking epidemic was insane. And my friend Hannah was telling me how she's a model, and her model friends on a night out, if they were getting in an Uber, they would pull out a strand of their hair and put their fingers on the window panes so that if they went missing, there would be a record. I do it. I walk home past places I know have CCTV, and women think it when walking alone at night. You think, am I going to end up like Sarah Everard? Is this going to be the last CCTV footage of me? You have that constant fear and checklist, and women were going out in really thick jackets because they were spiking women with needles. That's what it had come to, and it was really grim. And it's unfortunately, because of the whole way that people are jumping on the trans hate radicalization bandwagon, it's diminishing our voices. We're being reduced to being called like handmaidens just because we're inclusive of other genders, and it's taking away from us the bit of voice that we had fought for. That trans people aren't. The anti-trans brigade are helping to do that, and that's what they're claiming they're not doing. It's a mad mess. But Tate, and obviously the rise of the too many men with podcast mics, no offense. No, I think they just stopped selling.
I'm going to mute myself now.
No, but it's just there's loads of like these. You get it on TikTok, like loads of these like male influencers that are saying really shocking stuff, about women and about like body counts. Like, women have to be virginal and pure because they're insecure and they probably doubt their own performance. So they don't want a woman that's going to tell them what they're doing is wrong, do they? They want someone that's kind of inexperienced and malleable. And it's so clearly insecurity. But the problem is this is going into the minds of millions of young boys, and they're absorbing that. And that's terrifying.
Yeah, and then we've got the access to porn and stuff like that as well. And of course, the rise of the far right, the extreme right, the populist right, whatever you want to call them, they come under many terms. It's like, it's so misogynistic. It's a requirement of fascism to be, misogynistic. And you can already start to see this kind of creeping in now of like, us white women need to breed more. You know, we need to keep all the immigrants out, but let's go back to the family, you know, that you see in Conservatives.
Handmaid's Tale.
Nothing wrong with a husband and wife and 2 children. And, you know, I mean, the fact that women have to work 2 jobs, you know, to keep their family afloat now and things like that. It's creeping in. It really is. It's like this almost Handmaid's Tale stuff. You know, I mean, if the extreme side of the Conservative Party got in, it would not surprise me if they went after abortion. It would not at all. They'd start
And what about capital punishment? Yeah.
And it's like they are in America, you know.
What he was talking about there, Jacob Rees-Mogg has talked about both of those things. He was in the cabinet not too long ago, and he's talked about abortion because of his religion, and he's talked about us British need to mate more and breed more. And I just think it's
it's white supremacy. That is white supremacy ideology.
I want to ask you two, as a man, what can or what do you want us to do about it? Because there are people like me out there. Please don't think I'm going on the hashtag not all men bollocks, because I'm totally not. I understand why you need to. If you've got 100 men and one of them is going to rape you, I understand, you don't know which one it is, you've got to be careful of all 100 of them. So that's why it is all men. But what can we do to fucking stop this? Because it's got, honestly, just listening to you tonight, it makes me want to cry.
Call your mates out. That's one thing I would say. You need to call your mates out when they're using misogynistic language. That's a start. You know, when they're in groups, they're talking about some girl, you know, or what you want to do to some girl. I think that's a start, because I think a lot of men, especially young men, might feel uncomfortable in those environments, but they're not. Men want to fit in a lot, you know, they're part of the big team, you know, and they all like to be part of a bit more of a homogenous group, I think, than women. That's why all men wear suits in the city and things like that. And they like to be in teams and, you know, and I think that a lot of men will be around talk that they don't agree with, but they don't have the confidence to say, come on, that's really not appropriate, or that's not fair. You know, how would you like to see someone speak about your sister like that? How would you like to see someone about your daughter like that, or your mother like that? I think that's a start, you know? What would you say?
That then leads back to what I said about when I was in the army. In the army especially, because you're kind of secluded in Germany, a foreign country, you're young, with a bunch of strangers that you get to know and become almost family with. It goes back to peer pressure in a way, I suppose, in that either you join in with that shit or you don't, but then you're the odd one out and you're going to be the one who's bullied.
The army is the ultimate brotherhood, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you've got that pack mentality.
Yeah. I mean, I was in the signals, so women were in the signals too. But
how were they treated, Peter?
Not well. My partner Claire, I met her in the army, and when all of this hashtag Me Too stuff started coming out, and I listened to James O'Brien and Sheila Fogarty a lot on LBC, and they talked a lot about it, and hearing these stories from women, and slowly dawning on me that you both said it tonight, that there's probably not a woman in the country and further that hasn't had some sort of sexual violence really put on them. So I kind of asked Claire about it. I said, have you got any stories, sort of thing? And she did. And when she told me, it was just, it's horrific. You know, she'd be called a split arse and all kinds of names because she's a woman by her officers, the people she's supposed to be looking up to, the people that if we go to a war zone, they're in charge of you. And it's just horrific. I honestly despair.
It's yeah, and also I just want to make the point that Jacob Rees-Mogg bangs on about all that, but he also profited from the sale of abortion pills through one of his subsidiary companies. So he's a massive fucking hypocrite on top of everything else. But it really bothers me when you get this whole that you have to kind of like almost humanize yourself, like, oh, imagine it's your sister or your mother. No, just treat women with respect as human beings, regardless of their relationship to you. Because it really depresses me, even though I'm glad that like some guys, when they have a daughter, they eventually see what it's like. But it's like, Jesus, it shouldn't take that for you to recognize that, you know, the largest other gender suffers this stuff. It shouldn't take people, you know, seeing it firsthand to believe it. Just believe women. There's a disbelief. It's like they go, oh, most rape cases fail because it's his word against hers. Why has his word got all the weight? Like, why is a woman's testimony not considered to be of equal value to a man's? And that's where the massive problem is. And that's where the justice deficit is, where people go, if a rape case is dropped, they assume the guy was innocent, rather than the fact the CPF haven't pursued it properly. They don't take into account that person could still be guilty of that crime. It doesn't even cross their mind. It's like, oh, he's immediately cleared. It doesn't mean he's guilty, but it doesn't mean he's innocent. So I think that the calling out is really important, massively important. But also just men need to kind of shake up their mindset from maybe just thinking solely about their own lived experiences. That's a massive problem. And that's where there's a big weight of privilege, because there's a lot of things that women have to deal with that aren't even the crimes. There's things like emotional labor, where in a partner, like a heterosexual partnership, they've got to remember all the birthdays, they've got to remember all the checklists, they've got to remember all the things and all the stuff. And, you know, so many women that I know are exhausted whilst their husband chills out on a Saturday, and they're running around doing all the chores on top of their full-time job, you know, stuff like that. That kind of role, that the gendered roles need to change as well. Not saying that obviously all men do that. I'm sure there's a bunch that don't, and that's where I will put in the caveat. But generally,
I want to stop you both saying not all men, because
I rarely say it. I rarely ever say it. But the only reason I'm putting that caveat in is because in my political groups that I'm in, there are great men who are hands-on dads, who are involved dads. They don't deserve a medal for it. That should be how it is. But they've restored my faith, you know, because I grew up in a very kind of like patriarchal family, pretty grim, and they're bucking the trend. They're progressive people. So I'm not saying it. I never ever usually add that as a caveat, but the reason I am is because there is a shift on that front. I'm starting to see a shift on that front. So I don't want to double down on that particular thing. But then there are like all these additional pressures where, you know, women after childbirth, like postnatal depression, not treated properly, postnatal psychosis, the hell they have to, you know, the extra precautions women have to take just from if they want to enjoy a sex life, where you have to worry about whether or not you're going to get pregnant. We've got all these like additional stresses on us. And I think the least that men can do is recognize they exist, frankly.
Yeah. I'm very lucky. I've got a partner who's very feminist like Peter, and, you know, he actually looks after the house far better than I do. It's
feminists are the best boyfriend and husband, like, but proper feminists. But sadly, you also get the kind of like what are called like soft boys in the dating scenes nowadays. Oh, online dating, that's a whole nother level of
that's unsolicited dick pics.
I can't remember who it was. It was a stand-up comedian. She was brilliant. She said that her response to getting an unsolicited dick pic is to send back a bigger one she's received from someone else. I was like, yes, but again, you shouldn't have to go through that. But there's these soft boys and plastic feminists out there who will claim to be all feminist and claim to be all kind of like progressive, but they're just as misogynistic, and they treat women like crap. They just do it they weaponize like being feminist to do it, you know. So you've got all this to contend with, but it's a terrible mess. But I think a lot of the kind of escalation of it all has come from you know, the government and the media messaging, which is why I think we need massive press reform. We haven't got press freedom. We need to get the authoritarians out, who are, I'm telling you, gonna turn the country into like BNP, Trump, UKIP style politics if we don't get them out. It's an emergency. And then we need to rebuild, but we need to like, I'm not much of what is it, abolitionist. I don't necessarily, I think there is some strong arguments for some aspects, like certain systems like prisons and our current government. But I think that you just need to kind of like tear it down, rebuild it, burn it down, rebuild it, maybe. I don't know. But yeah, it should, there's just a rot at the core. And women just I don't feel like I can trust any institution to not treat me in a dehumanizing manner based on my gender. And that is shocking and depressing.
Yeah, it's really sad. It's really sad. And I would say, like, the Me Too movement, it kind of opened my eyes. I'm older. I was growing up in the 70s, you know, a lovely misogynistic, horrific time, really. I grew up, you know, poor council estate. And it's so embedded in those days through TV programs, through advertising, it actually took me a while. You know, I was probably in my 30s when I started to realize that this stuff that happened to me in my past and things, you know, was not right. And you know, wolf whistling, there's something like that where you just used to accept, you know, on TV, you'd have general TV. I mean, I remember my daughter once, she watched this thing with me. It was all right in the 80s or 70s.
Yes, I saw that. Yeah.
You've seen it, man. And, oh my God, you know, there's like, I can't remember the TV program Cops Robbers thing, and they're literally hanging out whistling at schoolgirls in their miniskirts and things like this. You know, my daughter was absolutely shocked, and it started to make me really think how I just accepted all of this stuff at one point. You know, like you'd be sitting there, and maybe someone in the family, you're a 5, 6, 7-year-old girl, and you're sitting there, and someone's reading the fucking Sun, and you got this big pair of tits staring at you on a bus or something.
Yes, that was mad. That was mad. That even went on in the 90s. I mean, I looked back at a program about the 90s, and I've watched a few documentaries, like the Beckham documentary, the Robbie Williams documentary, and a Spice Girls documentary, because I love, like I grew up, I was like a very, very young teen. I think I was starting secondary school when the Spice Girls came out. And the running theme throughout all of it is the press, the misogyny, the harassment. And looking back at the programs like TFI Friday, it was shockingly misogynistic. They weighed Victoria Beckham on live telly when she was a very skinny woman to check that she'd lost her baby weight and stuff like that. And it's like, you know, trying to market Bridget Jones as a fat woman. It's like she was 9 stone, for goodness sake. And like all the little jokes that you get in things like Love Actually, even it's like all the comments on the weight and all this kind of stuff, and it's like really dehumanizing behavior. But yeah, when you watch programs that go back further, I had a very similar upbringing to you. I grew up in a little 3 up, 3 down mouldy council house, but in front of me, I learned very early on about misogyny and about class, because in front of the school field, in front of me was one of the most prestigious private schools in Britain. And the way that we were treated by those boys, as the local poor kids, was horrific. So my anti-Tory fury was there from a very young age.
Yeah.
And my nan, God rest her, she was my idol, and she taught me all about the suffragettes and how important it is to vote, etc. But the misogyny and the kind of the really underhanded behaviour that women are facing occurs so young. And sadly, the most heartbreaking thing is, and the most enraging thing is, that young girls now are facing that still, and it's not gone away. But sadly, like, they're not maybe facing it as much from older men, because they know they'll probably get, you know, carted away for it. They're facing it from their male peers who are watching these tape videos. So it's really worrying. And it really does depress you. It makes you think, God, when's it going to end? You know, when's it actually going to end?
It does seem to have moved. I watch, I get all nostalgic watching about old video games and TV programs and stuff. And I kind of fell down a rabbit hole once watching TV adverts from the 70s and 80s and early 90s on YouTube, people have put compilations of these adverts on, and I was watching them, feeling all nostalgic and stuff. But as I watched more, I realised that, my fucking God, the sexism and even racism in some of them is mental. Like looking up girls' skirts and stuff to advertise fucking gravy and shit. I'm just like, what's going on? Do you know what I mean? You surely.
Oh, what?
Honestly, if you're bored one night, just go and watch some compilations of 80s TV adverts from the UK, and they will shock you more than.
You have to send me some like links, because I rewatched TFI Friday recently, because I was thinking about how we need a bit of a cultural need a bit of a cultural revolution in Britain, because no one can afford to be on the dole anymore and like make music. So like there's not there's a bit of a deficit, because some of the best bands out there were on the dole and they were practicing and stuff. And I watched TFI Friday, and it had the original ads from the 90s, and like you, I was sitting there like, oh my God.
What the fuck? Do you know?
Like, you want to flake in that, love? You know, those old Boddington adverts and stuff. And it was like, what the hell? Like, it was really surprising, just the broad, like, sexism. And at the time, you didn't really think about it. But then, like, the Spice Girls documentary really brought it home to me, when the way the weight was picked on constantly, the way that there was like, some of their songs were even about safe sex, and they were called sluts. And then when they got pregnant, they were bad role models to teenage girls, and there was literally nothing they could do right. And then you saw cultural figures on the telly on chat shows joining in on it. Like one of them even commented on Jerry Halliwell's bulimia, saying, "Oh well, she must be doing something right because she looks great." And I was like, I was just taken aback by it. And like, yeah, I mean, obviously the male stars got it too. Like, Robbie Williams terribly got destroyed. But this is where it brings back to that kind of media influence. I don't think that's entirely died off. I mean, obviously, I don't. There's still tits on Page 3. I don't think they are. They got rid of it, didn't they?
No, they got
rid of it, but it's not died off. You know.
But there was an uproar when they got rid of it.
There was.
It's like when they stopped the girls at the Formula One. You know, they were like, we're going to move on. It's a little bit old-fashioned now. Oh,
yes.
Absolute uproar about that, you know?
It's not really moved on when you think about, was it he was trying to be London mayor, that Tory, is the one who said that Carol Vorderman...
Oh, yeah, Sean Bailey.
Sean Bailey, said that Carol Vorderman shouldn't have an opinion because...
No, you can't...
Tits and a bum, what?
He said you can't be both. You can't have an opinion and then your boobs and bums or something like that.
He was talking about her Instagram. He was trying to suggest that there was like, she had her boobs and her bum out on her Instagram. She doesn't. She's fully clothed. She just happens to have boobs and a bum. Like she's a woman that exists with body parts, right? But then there was also he said that, and he said, oh, she can't be both, as if to say, But then there was a really shocking bit on GB News where I can't remember what his name is. That guy that looks a bit like a budget Rod Stewart. He's a Cockney. They get him on to talk. I can't remember what his name is now. But he was like, there was like a thing on her with Carol with a jumpsuit on representing the RAF, just wearing a jumpsuit. And he goes, oh, is it setting a good example for the RAF with her tits hanging out, is it? And like, she wasn't. She just had boobs in a jumpsuit that were covered, right? But she could have them out for the world to see, and it would not take away her right to express an opinion. Like this is like, they tried to throw this at me, right? I've been really open about having kind of like ADHD symptoms and PTSD symptoms, right? To encourage other people that there's no shame in it. That even like mouthy twats like me that kind of go out and make videos can still suffer with this stuff, and it's all right. They hurl that at me. Like as if if you've suffered with something like that, you're not allowed to have a political opinion, or like, oh, you're bringing it on yourself and all that kind of stuff. It's disgusting. It's like these double standards. And I also get the whole, oh, you blonde bimbo, you slut, all those kind of comments. And really, my response to that is usually, who told you?
Well, I think you're very brave to speak up about that stuff. We all have times in our lives, and struggle with our mental health, and that's really important to speak up against.
Saves lives. It saves lives. I've lost friends to suicide who I wish had said something, So to me, it's kind of like, if you can save one person, by, you know, I'm not claiming to be like the bloody, you know, that I'm saving loads of people, but it encourages the conversations to happen. It encourages someone to maybe ask their mate that's been quiet for a bit if they're okay. It's so important politically and for our own mental health, and in terms of any form of activism, that we have these conversations with each other. You've got to keep each other, look after each other, especially under this government. Jesus.
Yeah, it's right.
We're on our own. We're on our own.
I do think that I don't need to get embarrassed, but I think you are helping people by speaking up. I think anyone that tells their story about any kind of mental health issue just lets other people suffering know that they're not alone, and that can almost be enough to help them not go down so far that they end up hurting themselves and stuff. So you are definitely helping people.
Absolutely.
That's very kind.
If you can tell one person if you're suffering mentally, I think it helps. And it's something, and we all do it. We have physical health, we have mental health. It's vitally important. We check in with both, you know, in ourselves and in other people. And the more people who speak up about it being a completely natural part of life, just as physical health, you know, goes up and down.
Yeah, like having a sore leg or a hurt arm. But the problem is there's no services, and the government are cutting vital suicide prevention services. They cut the funds to them, and the most hideously affected areas receive the funding first, so they're the first to have it taken away. So which is why I always try to say, talk to a mate, get a mate to advocate with you, because trying to go to the doctor about this can be a nightmare. They'll just, you know, there's very little out there. There's very little help. But then there's also the aspect of it's very difficult to still not feel that internalized shame about talking about it, because it's an expression of vulnerability. And the problem is with my platforms, any form of vulnerability that I show will be weaponized. So as I'm saying it, I know that I'm going to have 50 people telling me to jump off a bridge. I'm going to have people telling me to, you know, just saying horrific things about my mental health, and they're going to throw it back at me. And I've even had Tory MPs do it publicly for speaking out, like that time that I spoke about seeking the support of the Samaritans. And I was basically just thanking the Samaritans for talking to me at Glasgow. It was really overwhelming. I hadn't been there in, you know, it sounds like a first world problem, but that place is vast. I walked like 50 miles in 5 days. It was hot. It was stressful. I was performing. I'm not a natural performer. It was a lot. And I spoke to someone, and I publicly posted about being thankful for them being there, because the Tories have cut all mental health services. So charities are stretched at the moment. And Brendan Clark Bellend took it upon himself to take that post and weaponise it. And he ended up just looking like an absolute arsehole. Like, no, even my enemies agreed that he was a dick. And it made the papers and stuff that had happened.
I don't understand how you can be so unaware of what you're doing to do something like that, to take a post, someone talking about their mental health and the Samaritans helping them, and to try and make that into something. What?
He called me a vile troll and said, "Oh, I'm playing the world's smallest violin for you," basically. And I
remember it. It was absolutely disgusting.
He's not the only one. Other Tory MPs have publicly tried to smear and been sexist towards me. Mark Jenkinson made comments basically like, "Oh, you should smile more, love. You should cheer up, love. It's not good for your mental health to be vitriolic all the time." I was like, "I'm vitriolic because it's like you. That's why I'm vitriolic, because I'm standing up for people, you prick." It's just grim.
Before we kind of wrap up, tell us a little bit about Get the Tories Out, Stop the Tories, what you're doing now, what's happening with you soon, what you're excited about, and what's coming up.
Really excited about the election. StopTheTories.vote is a tactical vote campaign. Our aim is to get a progressive in for any Tory seat, basically. So if we can, we're going to tell you how to vote for the progressive to get the Tory out and make them cry in a sports centre on election night, which is the dream. Now we really want to push for getting them into third. We had a really successful local election campaign, which is hard because it's so fiddly to do local election campaigns. Not many people try. And we helped, I think, we had about 500,000, 500,000 hits in 4 days on our website, and 1,000 Tory councillors lost their seats. So the exciting thing is that the polling isn't even taking into account what we're going to do with our tactical vote campaign, and we're going to go balls to the wall. And there's going to be a little thing on our Discord as well where you can volunteer, because we're going to be visiting marginal constituencies with a group of our friends. We're not saying who they are yet, so we're going to want to mobilise people in those areas to come out. We're going to go door knocking. We're going to, there's probably going to be a bit of press involvement there. We're also planning a really naughty election night party, which I'm
excellent.
Really,
I shall keep an eye on my email inbox for that invite. There,
you will be invited. You will be invited. Yeah, we've got big plans for it, but I think we're all going to deserve it after that. We've got like a collab with a London venue, which hopefully is going to work out. And if it does, it's going to be the party to end all parties. The screen in this place goes the entire width of the venue, so you will actually get to see them crying on huge screens that are like the biggest screen that I've ever seen in my life. But yeah, stopthetories.vote is really important. It's really important to vote. Get your voter ID, get registered, especially if you've moved. Really vital information. I mean, I don't think you can affirm this too much to get people, and you can get one for free. Get it sooner rather than later, because there might be a rush if it's called suddenly. So get prepared now for there to be an election very soon, because it could be May. And yeah, personally, I'm just looking forward to being able to sleep at night once we get the bastards out. I'm going to have about a couple of weeks off, I think, and then oh God, Josh will kill me if I don't mention this. Okay, the really important thing to also note is with stopthetories.vote is that it's not just about getting them out and then that's it. We've got aims for the next government that we want. Top of our list is voter reform, so your vote counts. Obviously, the EU is really important to a lot of the people on our team, and also press reform and making sure that our public services are properly funded and the most vulnerable people are looked after. And so we're going to use the contacts that we've made, and if we can mobilise en masse, we can influence the next government rather than Murdoch. And that's what our aim is, to kind of be the people's representatives rather than letting Murdoch choose our policies and prime ministers constantly.
I love that there's plans after the election.
So work begins the next. I mean, Josh said, "Oh, the work begins the next day," and I'm like, "The work begins after I've had a 2-week holiday, mate. The work begins after I've got over my hangover, and I'm going to need a bit of a break, because I think all of us, because we've all been so focused on it for so many years, we're going to have I don't know what's going to happen to us mentally and physically.
You won't know. I can tell you now. When we done the first National Rejoin March in 2022, everyone was telling me, because it'd been such a mental thing building up to it. It's the first time I'd ever done anything like that. Do you know what I mean? Everyone was saying, you need to have a break after, you need to have a break. But literally within a couple of days, I was calling another meeting, one of Lee saying, do you know what, we actually need to do this now.
Well, the thing is with activists, you can't, there's no off switch, I think. I think the most important thing that campaigners without plans are pointless. You're just pissing in the wind. You've got to have a plan. And you guys have got a plan. We've got a plan. And we're all kind of connected in our own ways.
I was going to say, it's all compatible. I don't see any... It's definitely all compatible, because it's all the same.
We're all friends, aren't we? We've all got links. I mean, I get on really well with Alex, for example, Corr, and Femi, and Rose Pierre, Max, and all those fellas, and we all go to each other's things, and everyone loves Steve Bray. I mean, God, man's a legend.
Oh, Steve's great. I spent Brexit anniversary with him in London, flew over. Me and a friend from Spain hung out on the island in the middle of the road with Steve and saw them.
Nice.
Wow, this is brilliant. Yeah. Excellent. Okay, well, thank you. I think we're kind of wrapped up, and thank you so much for joining us, Tan. It's been really nice chatting chatting with you. Keep up the great work and don't let the bastards get you down.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Back at you.
All right. Thank you so much.
You've got friends here as well. So if you want someone outside your normal circle to let off to, just get in touch and look out for yourself.
What if I need you to go kneecap someone for me? Yeah.
Yeah, 100%.
No worries. Say no more.
My partner was a sniper in the army.
Right, okay.
Not sniper, marksman, sorry. She was better.
I've got a scroll. Barry 45272 from Twitter. Time is coming. That's a joke.
We know it's a joke. Don't worry. You'll get some abuse off.
That'll be the clip I
Don't worry
use.
about it. We're fine.
That'll be the clip I use to advertise this episode.
Oh God, I've MI5'd. They'll come for me.
Oh, thank you. Thanks so much for taking the time out, Tal. It's been a real pleasure. You take care. Bye.
Bye.
Rejoin.